Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion, and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position, along with your favorite beverage, to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at Smith Weekly, including Brent S., Lydia B., Mark R., Paul M., at Mackin_man, and Jackie A. We have two guests on the program today, Mr. Bruce Lane, Executive Director, and Mr. Matt Hartmann, Director, U.S. Operations, are on the program representing GTI Energy. GTI is a Wyoming, United States focused ISR uranium exploration and development company advancing the Loherma ISR project in the Powder River Basin of central Wyoming. GTI Energy also holds the Great Divide Green Mountain exploration project in Wyoming, as well as exploration grounds in the Henry Mountains uranium region of Utah. The company is listed on the Australian Securities Exchange under the symbol GTR, as well as on the US OTC markets under the symbol GTRIF. Bruce, Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, yeah, Andrew, great to be back with you.
Great to be here, Andrew. Really appreciate your time here.
Well, thanks for coming on, guys. Really appreciate it. Well, Bruce, of course, you've been on the program before, but Matt, you are probably new to most of our audience. Let's kick it off here with just you giving us your background and experience in the junior natural resource sector and, of course, the uranium sector.
I've been around exploration side of the mining industry for well over 20 years now. My experience with uranium goes back to roughly 2005, maybe even late 2004. At that time, I was doing a lot of work with Strathmore Minerals down in New Mexico. Eventually went on board with them, spent some time as their senior geologist down there. And over the 20 years that followed that, spent some time with Uranium Resources, where I was a director of technical services. Uranium Resources at the time held some of Encore's current production assets at Rosita and Kingsville Dome. So I've been experienced and seen a broad swath of the industry. In addition to Uranium Resources, I spent some time with SRK Consulting, whereby I was allowed to see not just uranium operations and exploration here in the United States, but also on a global level. Been around, I've kicked the rocks, I've seen a lot of different uranium over the years. I first got involved with GTI going back to about 2019 when they entered into the uranium space as well as entered into the United States with the assets in Utah. Worked on those through COVID, enjoyed working with Bruce, spent a little time away, went and did something else for a few years, and then came back recently earlier this year to help move along, in particular, the Loherma asset in Wyoming and to provide a lot of the technical expertise to kind of aid that transition from more the exploration and early resource development as we try to progress that through to more of a development cornerstone for the company.
Matt, thank you for that. And yeah, I think it's interesting to point out here just your time in the sector. As you well know, technical expertise in the sector is quite lacking. And so your decision to come over and start working with GTI Energy on advancing Loherma into development stages, I think is a good point here to bring out to the audience. You chose to work on this one, so I really appreciate that, and also given some of your experience and background there for the audience as a new guest on our program. Any other comments there, of course, but I'd like to have Bruce here talk about a few things here on the uranium market just to get his take on the current market, and then Matt will follow up with you on that. And of course, we'll come to company news events as well, because there's a little bit of a list already that's built on the news front recently that I want to discuss. But Bruce, why don't you start off here with just your current take on the uranium market? We are in a correction period here, which is not new to the sector, despite some of the thoughts and feelings out there, depending on which one you want to take there. But how do you see the rest of the year finishing out for the sector, Bruce, and where we stand today?
Yeah, I think there's plenty of pundits out there and people both within companies and other, I guess, talking heads in the industry. I'll say that in the positive pejorative, prognosticating about where the sector is going to end up towards the end of the year. And look, it seems to be positive generally, the idea that the uranium price itself will strengthen into the back end of the year, and I'm not going to say that anything different to that. That's what we hope will happen. It doesn't have a huge amount of impact in the short term on what we do, but it certainly would be helpful to see the uranium price go up and to see the equities in general, improve after what has been a pretty tough period. I think since that spike in the price of around $105 at spot in the early part of the year, we've obviously seen a lot of tracking backwards and sideways since then. So, we look forward to some sunshine in both the uranium price and equities price towards the end of the year. Where the price is at the moment, which is a long-term price of getting close to $80 and a spot price around $80, that's a price that we believe makes our project economic if we can get the right result out of the rest of our exploration or our resource development drilling and get into a scoping study. So, we're pretty happy with where the uranium price is at the moment. We, of course, want it to be higher, but it's high enough at this point.
I'm definitely not the market guru that some are. I think I look at it from a little bit different perspective. And having this technical background, I'm of the belief that good projects get moved forward regardless of what the market looks like, to the point that you get it to a development phase that it benefits from market movement at that time. If you can't advance the project when the markets don't look quite as favorable as you'd like, then your ability to do so when the markets are better are just as limited. So from my perspective, I'm a little agnostic to it. Definitely aware of it, but a little agnostic to it, knowing that if we continue to advance our assets, move Loherma forward, for example, position that correctly, once the markets return and once we see that investor action take place, we're just going to benefit from that.
Appreciate those comments very much, Matt, and can align with that as well. Bruce, thank you for your comments there. Company-specific success is important here. Sentiment certainly helps a lot and helps us companies that are small, like GTI Energy, raise capital. Obviously, that's always helpful as we move down the road here, but nonetheless, things have to move forward, and the company's in a position to continue to do that and has a supportive investor base, as we've recently seen with some of the news. Matt, I want to stay with you for a moment. The company is working on a drill program at Loherma that is presently underway. News on that has come out. Talk about your goals and objectives with this program to advance Loherma towards further potential development.
This year we have approximate 76 drill holes permitted that we plan on drilling all of at Loherma. A few different things we're trying to do with this program. One is obviously to continue to expand the resource that we have there. Currently we sit at about 5.7 million pounds of inferred uranium resource. We're hoping to push that a bit higher so that we're in line with some of our peers that kind of show a more near-term production profile. So in addition to the resource expansion, we're going to be testing some deeper potential at Loherma. Obviously, there's a fairly well-known resource that kind of sits in the lower Wasatch to upper Fort Union formations. We'll be going perhaps a little bit deeper into the Fort Union with this program, looking to expand upon that. It's been relatively untested in the past. And then obviously we'll be collecting quite a little bit of data from a geochemical standpoint, looking at potential disequilibrium. It's not really known to be an issue in this area, but we just want to confirm that. And then we'll also be collecting some hydrogeologic data. Obviously, if we want to push this project forward as an ISR project, which we feel very comfortable doing so, we need to have some data that continues to confirm that as we move forward and kind of decide on what we do study-wise in the future. We'll put this program to push this forward, I should say, over the next couple of months. We started it, finally got the rigs out in the field on Wednesday of last week. Have been progressing actually quite rapidly with that program. We went into the weekend with 10 holes done already. Was able to kind of assimilate that data and get a release out this morning in Australia. Even with our early drill results, we're continuing to see the type of thickness and mineralization grades that are very suitable for ISR mining. We're seeing thicknesses in nice mineralized packages that are 14, 15, 16 feet in thickness, which for ISR is quite nice to have. What you really don't want to end up with is sands that are 1 to 2 feet in thickness and really don't give you the flow rates you'd like to see to be able to move that material out of there. So really looking forward to continuing to drill out there. Like I said, we'll be drilling probably for the next, probably 6-7 weeks. And as we are able to put those results together and present those, we'll get those out to the investors so they can see how we were progressing. And then obviously we'll be able to move forward to some additional milestones after we complete this drill program this summer.
Looking forward to seeing some of those results come out here in the coming weeks and months, and I think that's should be quite good given the timing here with the market. Appreciate that. Bruce, just to add on here, over the past few months, you've added more operations-oriented people to the company board. Matt has taken on a bigger role at the company, stepping up here as director, but also Simon Williamson, ex-Cameco Australia, has joined the company. Talk about these appointments and why they are important as GTI starts down that ever important development pathway and, of course, potential production pathway in the years ahead.
Yeah, we've been quite conscious to try and move our board into, I guess, a mode that moves beyond an exploration company. And we think we've got a real opportunity here with Lohema to create a development asset, a production asset. And so we wanted to introduce some new people onto the board who have the technical skills and the project development experience that suits our stage and is appropriate for the next certainly the next year or two. And Simon, having 13 or 14 years with Cameco around feasibility and studies for Yallourn and Kintyre, certainly has the requisite experience, and he also has a really good network in the global uranium business. And as you know, it is a relatively small community of people, and some of them have been around for a long time. And I think having Simon on board to help us with some of those connections has already been very useful, let alone his experience in moving a project through those project development lifecycle stages. And similarly, obviously with Matt, it's great to be working with someone that we know and trust and has the level of technical expertise that Matt has and the project experience with uranium in general, but more importantly with Wyoming projects and ISR projects and projects that are within the sort of 10 or 20 miles of our project. So hopefully that lends an air of credibility to what we're hoping to achieve going forward, and it certainly puts us on a path to be able to support our activities over the coming year or two.
Bruce, thank you for that. I think that does point us out some critical items here as companies start to staff up as they progress from these various stages. And, it's good to see people with this type of experience and this type of reputation come on board here at GTI, while other peer companies out there are more interested in appointing bankers and accountants to their management teams. So I really appreciate the effort there. And it's always good to see that there's a mix capital markets experience, but also the ability to drive these projects forward on the ground is absolutely important if you want to get serious in this business. So I really appreciate the thoughts on that. With that, any other comments, of course, but Matt, let me ask you this. I'm sure Bruce wants to comment here as well, but you know it a little bit well here, being based in the U.S. for a long period of time, but the company did announce during July that it had joined the Uranium Producers of America. Talk about that and why that is important for the company as it goes down this development pathway.
Uranium Producers of America, it's been around for a long time here in the States. I think I went to my first UPA meeting back in probably around 2005. At that time, it was a skeleton of an organization. Didn't have a big lobbying front to it there because there just wasn't that much money put into it by all the juniors that were participating in the early part of that cycle. Over that time, over the last almost 20 years, it's definitely gained a lot more momentum. It is a lobbying force in the United States. It played a big role in the Section 232 legislation, which ended up creating a stockpile within the United States of uranium material pulled from U.S. U.S. mines. So it's a great organization. If you look at the other companies that are in there, it's all the majors you would expect that are producing here in the United States, the Encores, the DUR Energies, the other large market cap companies like UEC, as well as some of the other companies that are interested in nuclear energy in general, especially on maybe the conversion side and some of those other pieces of it. As a company that's moving from that explorer to developer phase, very pleased that we were able to have those discussions with the UPA and presented in front of their executive committee. We were approved for membership into that. So looking forward to being able to join in some of these conversations at the highest level in Washington, D.C. around policy and uranium mining in the United States. And so far, I've really enjoyed our early interactions and look forward to, like I said, playing a role in that organization as we go forward in the company's journey.
Very important as well. I think this piece, it adds the ability to get things done in obviously the company's jurisdiction, Wyoming, and being part of that group, obviously you're able to tap the resources of that group as you guys go down that pathway of potential development here, and also the permitting process and the early stages that are required there. Bruce, any comments on the joining up here of the Uranium Producers of America?
Well, just to say that it is a group of our peers. It just puts us that much closer to the reality of implementation of the new pieces of legislation that have been passed through the government in the US. So it gives us a forum to air our views in and to be part of the lobbying that goes forward. And I think we look forward to to that relationship with the members going forward.
While we're on some of this news items, and you can tie this in with some of the capital raising efforts that just occurred at the company, talk about the capital structure of the company for a moment now that the recent placement is completed. And of course, the rights offering is to be completed soon on a post-placement offering basis, cash on hand post, and then of course, shares outstanding and major shareholders that you can mention, including the management team and board.
The capital structure, we've got at 2.5 or just north of 2.5 billion shares on issue after the placement offer. The rights entitlement offer will be an additional circa 500 million shares, which puts us just above 3 billion shares post the both of the offers. And the completion of the rights and the issuing of all the options associated with the raising will happen sort of post September. We've got a shareholders meeting in September to approve some of those additional security issues. I think our quarterly said just over $3 million, the quarterly we just put out yesterday. And then we'll have obviously the rights entitlement monies, which are a little over 2 million on top of that. 1.6 million of the rights is underwritten, so we've got a high degree of confidence that that obviously that money will come in, and we're doing a shareholder outreach program to make sure that our shareholders are aware of the rights offer and take up their opportunity to get what is, we think, a very well-priced offer. It'll be at 0.4%, and it's got a pre-attaching option associated with it on a 1-for-3 basis with a strike of 1 cent and a term of 4 years. So we've got sufficient funding certainly to conduct this drill program that we've got underway, and we'll be funded to work into the early part of that scoping study should we get to the point we believe we hope we will be in October, and we can push the button on that.
So we have an idea where we get on runway with the cash here. It looks like there'll be a pretty good number of cash once all this is completed, and everything looks good because the bulk of it has been finished on the placement. So I appreciate the comments there. Just on a management team and board ownership level, can you discuss that briefly for us?
Within the management board team, we've got less than 1% ownership, but we're looking at putting some other mechanisms in place for management to acquire further shares, but it is fairly modest at this point. We've obviously had a fairly dilutionary period over the last year or so, and myself, for instance, I've been diluted along with other shareholders, so I feel their pain. We haven't got any holder that sits as a substantial holder above 5%. We've got quite a retail-oriented register with 3,300 shareholders. So we have some significant parties involved. I'm not at liberty to disclose the names of all of those people at this point. But suffice to say that we've attracted quite a strong interest through this last capital raising, in particular, at these value levels. Given the advanced state of the project compared to our peers, we hope that we'll see an appreciation of value on the company over the next 6 to 12 months.
Good to see some of those additional key supporters come into this equity at this stage. Once again, at a very interesting point here for the company and where it's headed. Appreciate the comments on that. One more question here, Bruce, and I want to come back over to Matt here in a moment. But what would you say, Bruce, to investors out there who don't think your remuneration is justified, and if that has something to do with the share performance?
Yeah, it's always tough when the share price has tracked downwards for an extended period of time. And I think I would say two things. One, that my remuneration is lower than most of my peers, if not all of them, in the sector, despite, I think if you look at our reports, which reported a very significant income for, I think, 2022, but most of that was share-based payments. We're valued at a price about 4 times ahead of where we are at the moment. So it looks like a lot. It's not cash. I obviously haven't sold any shares. I'm participating in the rights. So my cash remuneration is actually very modest, I believe, compared to our peers. And I think what I would say is, we're driven by adding value to the company and driving our projects and our story forward. And so, we've been very active since 2 years ago, where we had no resources. We now have £7.4 million or close to it in resources across the company's portfolio. We've acquired significant new projects. We've added to the board and management team, and I think we've put ourselves in a very, very good position. So if I look at the intrinsic value of the company, putting aside the vagaries of the global stock markets and indeed, sentiment towards uranium securities, and I think we can certainly point to having added very significant value to the company. The fact that it hasn't shown up in the share price just yet is obviously not ideal from anybody's point of view, but we aren't the only one. I think if you look at the sector, whether you're a shareholder in some of the largest or some of the smallest, they've all suffered. The larger ones suffer, but the smaller ones typically suffer worse. And so I think when you're bouncing along the bottom from a sentiment point of view, it is always challenging for people to take some sort of a paper loss on their shares and want to share their pain. And I respect that, obviously, and I am also a shareholder and I take pain as well. So we believe in what we're doing. I believe we've added value, and I don't believe that my remuneration is out of order with our peers.
Bruce, thank you for that. A few comments there. I always encourage the audience to look at comparables out there. It's going to take a little bit of time. You have to look through the filings, which is always a fun exercise. But, take a look at the ASX listed peer companies, also the US, Canadian listed peer companies as well. And also just take a look at the stage of the company, if it's a true peer or not. Obviously, GTI is probably one of the smallest development stage companies out there presently in the junior sector, as well as you have to also take a look at where we are in this correction and where we are in the cycle. And I do think that, if anybody has suggestions as to what Bruce should be paid, maybe they can submit those confidently to the company for evaluation. But also that I think it makes sense that we've seen before, we've been here long enough to say this, that we've seen folks add value at a time when the market and people don't care. We've certainly seen a portion of that pass by us here in 2024, where that has happened with some companies. And I would also just add that piece as well. And also that we of course, at SmithWeekly, we're investors in a lot of these uranium equities. And of course, we've had significant painful events, and we don't always pick winners. And we've certainly had our share of losers for a time. So just that the audience needs to understand there are a few other things here. And trust me, we can get very irritated as well with certain things that happen out there in this sector. And there's nothing we can do about it other than sit down and continue to analyze how to best move forward. And I think that's also important. Let me just put it back to you and Matt for any further comments, and then we'll move on here.
So I'm always happy to engage with anybody who wants to have that conversation and go through details. I very much respect shareholders' right to get involved in the conversation. We've been at this since 2018. we don't get inflation-adjusted pay rises or any of those things. We work pretty crazy hours at times and go through a lot of stress and challenges. We don't resent any of that. That is part of what we do. We enjoy what we do. All we hope to do is get paid enough to keep the lights on and remain motivated on behalf of the shareholders of the company. So I don't know, Matt, whether you've got any other comments.
I'll keep mine relatively high level, or maybe just kind of circle it back on why I'm involved with this company. I've known Bruce now for 5 years, give or take. I've seen a lot of different junior companies, not just uranium, but across a wide swath of the commodity sector. And I have a great appreciation for the level of effort and time that Bruce puts into this company, and it's one of the reasons why I'm here. There's a lot to be said for a managing director who puts in as much time as Bruce does and wants to actually get things done. Anybody that knows me knows I like to get things done, so it's a great match here for me.
Matt, thank you for that. That's always appreciated, the comments there. And there has to be a full picture view. And obviously, I would say if you're also a U.S. investor, don't forget that FX clip when it comes to Canadian dollars or Australian dollars. It's also a significant spread when you take a look at those numbers today. Matt, I'd like to have you talk as this campaign this year comes to a conclusion. Obviously, there's the potential start to the scoping study, pre-permit environmental work, data collection that has to happen, and these things that have to happen quite early now these days as we go into the development phases of any project, especially a project that is either mining or plumbing in the case of ISR. But Matt, what do you see as really the next steps to advancing Low Herma to that scoping study stage? And what do you think that time frame is to produce that scoping study to the market?
So one of the first steps that we're going to have on the backside of our current drilling program is going back and revisiting our mineral resource estimate. It's been a bit of time, I think over a year now, since we last published a mineral resource estimate for the Low Herma project. Since that time, there was a drill program that occurred in kind of late November, kind of before the snow flight here in the US. And then we also acquired some additional claims out to the east and bolted those onto our Low Herma project. We do have drill data for that. We will be drilling in that area as part of this summer's program. So I think we have quite a bit of upside that we're going to be able to realize within our next version of that mineral resource estimate. So that'll be the first piece that we work on. Obviously, I think I said earlier, we sit at approximately 5.7 million pounds of inferred mineralization right now, or inferred resource right now. We will hopefully push that upwards, 7.5, 8 plus, somewhere in there on the backside of this drill program. That puts us in a nice sweet spot if you look at us compared to other peers, especially for satellite type ISR development that show phenomenal economics. So once we have that mineral resource estimate complete, we'll look and make sure that we kind of fit where we think we need to be from a total resource side, make the decision hopefully to go ahead and progress with that scoping study. I see us kind of having an announcement around pushing forward with that scoping study in probably sometime in Q4 this year, November, December type timeframe, once we are able to publish that revised mineral resource estimate. We still have to kind of firm up, a lot of plans around a scoping study and as far as who we would use as a consultant, if you will, to kind of be the masthead on that report. I do have the benefit of having been a co-author on several scoping studies for ISR in the past. I know what data is required to get one of these published. And that's part of what we are collecting right now during our drill program. So as I noted earlier, geochemical data. We'll have obviously some other data off of core, hopefully. We'll have hydrogeologic data. All these other little bits and pieces that are modified, that play into the modifying factors when you look at a scoping study for an ISR project. Once we have that decision to proceed, I think, I don't want to get too far out over my skis on how I commit the timeframes here. But generally speaking, from time to decide to move forward, you can generally get these done well within a 6-month time frame. So it would be reasonable to say, sometime during the first half of 2025, we would have the results of that study available. And then, in parallel with writing that study and getting that prepared, we would push forward with a larger plan of operations for further what I would probably call more resource delineation drilling at the Low Herma project, infill drilling, however you want to put that together, to bolster up and continue to convert that inferred number that we have right now up to indicated over a larger swath of the project. You'll see quite a bit of news flow as we hit the back half of this year, really around development plans and how we move that project from exploration to development. And we'll have the activities that we're announcing to kind of back up that progress with it. And we'll be able to outline for the investor what that path is and how it moves forward, and be able to clarify a little bit more as we get into that, the time frames that we'll be looking at to push this forward to development, to other type of, say, construction decisions. It is not unheard of, and it has been set as a precedent in the United States that ISR mines, uranium ISR mines, have been built, successfully operated off of a scoping study or a PEA. These would have been Canadian companies, but the same level of study. It's not necessary to push these through to PFS or certainly not FS. The type of mining and the type of knowledge and the type of experience that exists both in the industry and locally within Wyoming around these projects is such that you can build these off of a scoping study. So I think we'll have some decisions to make as we look at the results of that, assuming we get there. And could be quite interesting from a timing standpoint as we move forward and look towards, the potential for pushing the Low Herma into production sooner rather than later.
Matt, thank you for that. I think it's important to point out that this milestone, if it comes in the first half of 2025, should start to wrap around how you guys envision this project moving forward. The early stage economics, obviously, scoping studies are have a level of margin of error, if you will, in how they're produced, but also that the market can start to see what this project is shaping up to look like. And obviously there is that expansion and upside potential that's yet to be brought forward, but at least today as it stands, what the project could potentially look like, or even post this current campaign, what the project looks like, so the market can start to see how that looks in a production scenario. Obviously, savvy folks can put together some numbers today on that, but it'll be good to see that formal study come out and hit the market at some point in 2025. So I appreciate that. Matt, just back to you for one question. Are there any other plans on other company projects? Obviously, this company is not a single project company. It has Low Herma as the primary development project, but there's also some pipeline that's already been built into the company. Any plans on other company projects at this point, or will the focus remain on Low Herma in the immediate future?
Obviously you kind of nailed it right there. Low Herma is the priority for the company. However, we do have other areas of interest that we're trying to advance with our projects. We currently are in the permitting process for a drill program at our Green Mountain project. For those that have followed the company, they remember that we flew a airborne geophysics program over that area last summer. We've been able to look at those results. We've been able to do a little more groundwork out there, looking at the prospectivity and where we feel that we should be focusing drilling efforts out there. So we do have a small drill program that's going through permitting. I don't know that we've necessarily committed to drill that. I think it's going to, we'll see how we get through this year, see how we look budget wise, and see if we think it's going to be creating value to go and drill that at this time. We also currently or still have open exploration permits on our Great Divide Basin assets, as well as our assets over in southern Utah, conventional assets over there in the Henry Mountains. We're currently looking at potential consolidation of ground and some other things within the Great Divide Basin, and perhaps holding off putting any more drill holes there, but that's certainly something that we're thinking of looking into 2025 as being an option, especially if Low Herma advances the way we feel. We want to start to set up, what that second project is going to be. We see this company as having some potential around 2 eventual projects, and just trying to figure out where to best put that capital right now to move one of these options forward. I will say over in Utah, we're still evaluating what's going on there kind of within our peers. We have had some interest in those properties. Some people have approached us wanting to know if we could vend those or do some type of option on those. I don't know that that's necessarily in the cards right now, but we're definitely all ears and listening to the various opportunities that are coming forward with those. Low Herma is the primary project, and that's where we're going to focus our efforts. But we're not forgetting about our other properties in the portfolio, and are trying to very wisely apply our capital across them so that we derive value going forward with those.
Bruce, additional comments there?
No, I think Matt's covered it really well. The only thing I would add is with respect to moving Lohurma forward through its project life cycle. I think the interesting thing about the project and what probably makes it a little different is being an alkaline leach style project. Obviously, sandstone hosted. It looks very much like the projects around us, of which there are 7 permitted facilities in the Powder River Basin and then down in the Great Divide Basin with Uraenergy's Lost Creek. And then the fact that they're moving on with Shirley Basin, an 8 million pound project, alkaline leach again, and then looking at the Gas Hills, which is similarly around 8 million pounds. We've got, some really current analogues to look at that show a path forward. They show some guidance on what capital would look like. And as Matt said, we can probably get this thing moved forward relatively quickly. There's still permitting to get through and all those things, but that's really what our focus is. And I think we need to differentiate ourselves from the acid leach projects on the planet, like Kazakhstan and the challenges they have with acid. Obviously, we've got Boss Energy in Australia, which is in ramp up, and we've got Peninsula, which is getting close to start up in at the Lance project in Wyoming as well. So, we think we've got a reasonably predictable path forward with the project. We don't have to invent the processing technology. It's about as close to off the shelf as you can get, I think. So, we're very optimistic about the possibilities for the project. We've got to get through this next bit of exploration and resource development work, get the scoping study underway. But there's a very clear path for it, and that is very much our focus.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that points it out also to the audience, the differences between troubled ISR projects, the different methodologies on recovery, jurisdictional differences. We've seen a lot of projects have difficulties, whether it's production goals not being met, overpromise, underdelivered, these types of things that are occurring out there in the space. And, it's always good to take note of these challenges so we can, of course, improve at our own companies and avoid these pitfalls as we move forward, especially moving into development and on down the stages. So I appreciate your comments there. Guys, as you both know, U.S. M&A activity will remain quite warm and has been. And of course, places like Wyoming, tier 1 jurisdictions will be in focus and will remain to be that focus as the cycle matures here. But talk about a little bit, Bruce, we'll start with you, the GTI proposition for those potential suitors out there that might be producers right now or a company that is looking to build a pipeline. And this would be a perfect ad for a company who wants to fit in a project like Lohurma behind maybe another asset that's supposed to come online ahead of it. Yeah, just comments there, Bruce, and then from Matt as well on this one.
So we've got in Wyoming, but also obviously in Texas with Encore. We've got now 2 companies, being Encore and UR Energy, in production, and UR Energy has been producing for quite a while now down at Lost Creek, and they're developing, actively building Shirley Basin. We know Encore's got Alta Mesa and Rosita up and running, and they're starting to turn their attention to their pipeline of projects, of which the Gas Hills at 8 million pounds is part of their pipeline, as is Dewey Burdock. So you can see with the existing guys who are in production, they are already turning their not just their minds but their capital and their time to their next projects. So you can see how their thinking is developing around building a pipeline of supply for the utility customers who really want long-term, stable, reliable supply from domestic US producers. We've got UEC due to come online in August at Irrigary Christensen Ranch, and so they similarly, you would imagine, once they're in production, they'll obviously be turning their mind to pipeline stretching out 10, 20, or even 30 years or more to be able to deliver long-term, stable supply to the utility customers. You've got Peninsula there. If they can get up and running at the end of this year, they've got a fairly significant land package there, and they are talking similarly about expanding their exploration activities and bringing other deposits into the pipeline for delivery for those long-term stable supply contracts. Energy Fuels is another one, and who knows what Cameco will do. So where do we fit into that? Well, we think we're the most advanced project outside of those major companies that are already permitted and licensed and either in production or soon to be in production. So we can shortcut the process if somebody wants to acquire us. It would have taken probably 4 years, we think, to get to our point if you started with a piece of ground with no holes in it. We're already a long way ahead of most, if not all, of our peers, certainly in Wyoming and in many other places on the planet. So yes, I think we'd be a shortcut to a company to help fill that pipeline and provide certainty around supply for those utility customers going forward. I guess when it comes down to it, our job is the same regardless of any of that. We're moving the project forward as quickly as we can so that we can show that it's an economic asset. We'll build our team at the right time to suit the opportunity. And if the opportunity for us is to go through the licensing and permitting stage, it's within our capability to build a team to deliver that. And that's what we'll press on to do. If in the meantime, we get approached with an offer we can't refuse or that we think is very good value for and a good outcome for our shareholders, of course, we'll look at that very seriously. And we believe that those opportunities will occur because consolidation is part of, the sector's theme, I guess. It has been in the past and it will be going forward. I guess assets will consolidate around good teams with good capital and a good track record for delivering projects. So, we think those opportunities may very well turn up and we'll respond to them accordingly. But I guess in the meantime, our job it doesn't really change. We're getting on with trying to move the project forward as fast as possible.
Well said there at the end. Absolutely. I appreciate that, Bruce. And that's what you have to do to get that attention. And you guys are definitely moving down that path and are demonstrating that with obviously people coming on board and moving this thing down the road. So Matt, any follow-up comments on the M&A discussion?
Really nice answer by Bruce. He covered a lot of it. I think one of the things I just want to circle back on is the fact of we're kind of in a unique position with the asset that we have at Loherma. I know the projects in Wyoming, they've all been around a long time. The current market for new properties or acquiring properties is very tight. Nearly everything that has decent prospectivity within the state of Wyoming for ISR is spoken for. You're not going to go out and find another Loherma from scratch and be able to build that up. I just don't see that happening. I don't see anybody moving forward with anything like this. So I always go back and commend Bruce for kind of his timing on this and being able to find an asset that was maybe flying just a little bit under the radar and be able to put together the data so quickly on it and progress it forward. But I think what you look at with GTI and Loherma is you have an asset in a tier 1 jurisdiction for uranium ISR production. You have one that has a resource in place. Now, we're not a UR Energy, we're not an Encore, we're not some of these companies with current or extremely near-term production on the horizon. But what we are is that next tier of company. If you look around at what other people or what people might consider to be our peers within the industry right now on the exploration side, I can't name one that has a published resource in Wyoming that's slated for ISR type production. And that for us is a big differentiator. As Bruce alluded to, we're probably 4 years ahead of a lot of these companies that have come in late on this cycle. And I think we're positioning ourselves well to take advantage of that. We're having conversations now, and I don't know that now's the right time to do anything just based on valuations across the sector, both on other companies and ourselves. But we will continue to move this project forward, build more value into that, so that when the timing is right, when the market realizes just what we have here, we'll be ready to act at very attractive valuations.
Well said. I appreciate the extra comments there. I think that does put it into perspective here and down the road here by on the ground work getting completed and advancing that scoping study and moving this down the development pathway. And of course, that will add all the more to these conversations that are taking place here. Bruce, I just want to have you just talk briefly about overall awareness. Obviously, this is subject to market conditions as we move into the end of the third quarter and also into the fourth quarter here, but overall awareness activities You guys do have a bunch of news coming out here. There's a lot of on-ground work happening that you and Matt are leading there on the ground. So we'll hear about that in the coming months. But any other comments on awareness activities, any specific plans on this front, or is it again just on the ground deliveries, which I think are the most important that are planned in the coming months?
We're obviously in that part of our year where we are focused on ground activities, and it can be a long time between programs or feel like a long time between drill programs. So we're very focused on trying to make sure that we get the best result out of that. But at the same time, we are obviously going to and are spending some time and effort on getting our story out, and via digital media of which this podcast is one of those activities, and also just investor meetings, broker meetings, road shows in various jurisdictions. So we'll work on getting the message out, and obviously our shareholders, we need to talk to existing shareholders, and we do that quite regularly. But we are also trying to make sure our story gets out to a wider audience, and particularly in North America as well as across Australia and Southeast Asia.
Well, guys, really sums it all up here as far as the things I wanted to discuss here on this podcast. And hopefully we covered everything well here. I want to leave it here for now and, of course, take any final comments tied in with this. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 12 million Australian dollars here. Why should investors consider GTI Energy at this point for the company? And of course, given current uranium market conditions,
You've heard some of it here today within this discussion. We're going to have quite a bit of news flow. We're going to have quite a bit of energy behind our projects as we go through the back half of this year and into next year. In addition to that, I see GTI as being extremely undervalued right now. In pretty much every conversation we have, that's acknowledged. That's not something that's unknown. So I think this provides a great entry point for an investor. I think it provides them with exposure to a phenomenal news flow around a development project in a tier 1 jurisdiction. And if we're able to deliver on the items that we've discussed here today, then I see no reason why that wouldn't provide a potential for an excellent return to somebody.
I think if you look at the sort of intrinsic value of the company, there's only really been one transaction in the US in the past, sort of 6 months, and I think, if you look at the valuation on that transaction, I think Premier American acquired American Future Fuels. If you look at the valuation per pound on that transaction, and look at the number of pounds we've got, you'll see that our market cap, and particularly if you look at it in the adjusted US dollar metric, is very modest given the pounds and the potential that we have. So we think that an investment in GTI Energy, GTR being our code on the ASX, at the moment is a good leverage to an improvement in the sentiment for uranium equities going forward. And the price of uranium going forward. And I think that there is the real possibility that company's valuation could change quite a bit over the next 6 to 12 months. Look, we think it is well positioned and well valued at the moment for an entry point for investors.
and Bruce, what is the best way for folks to reach out to the company?
There's an email there, info@gtienergy.au is a good place to start. I see all those emails, and you can get to me on that email address. There's a phone number there, of course, as well, that if anyone wants to talk to me, please feel free to reach out, ask any further questions, and make any points that you'd like to.
Well, Matt, Bruce, thank you for taking the time to update on GTI Energy. Best of luck in the coming months here. Looking forward to more news, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew. Enjoyed the conversation.